Hello, welcome to our channel. Today we're joined by our senior fellow, Dr. Stephen McCabe. So Steve, we couldn't really not talk about the President-elect Joe Biden today. Yesterday, Prime Minister Boris Johnson congratulated Joe Biden on his US election win and said that he looked forward to strengthening the partnership between the US and the UK. So what do you think the relationship could look like between Boris and Joe then, compared to the relationship that he had with Donald Trump?
Well, I've always been of the view that Johnson and Trump are like-minded in many ways and very divergent in others. And one of the insults that's been made from the sort of the Biden team of Johnson, he's a bit of a shapeshifter. I mean, Johnson is peculiar because, of course, he's at heart a liberal, and indeed, even within the Conservative Party, he's still regarded as being he's one of their greatest assets, but nobody can quite work him out at times. We know this in terms of his stance on Brexit, which of course changed depending upon who was influencing him. The point is, though, that the special relationship, I mean, it goes back way in history, but of course was cemented most particularly between the sort of the two leaders during the sort of war, the Second World War, Churchill and Roosevelt. And so in that sort of sense that we have something which is regarded as being unique, and of course will continue. That there is that sort of view that America and England, two cultures separated by language, which is a sort of an unusual but strange way of looking at it. But I mean, I think that the special relationship will continue. It'll possibly rock. I mean, quite clearly, Biden is a great believer in consensus and people coming together to cooperate. So I think his view is that sort of the European project and the EU is important. And I suspect he will be trying to influence Johnson to strike a deal, and most particularly, of course, in terms of its impact on Ireland, which of course is something that he has Irish roots, and of course that's very important to every American president if they can find those links.
So Joe Biden also said that a US-UK trade deal was contingent on upholding the Good Friday Agreement. So how do you think Joe Biden could impact the Brexit proceedings then?
Well, quite clearly, Biden understands this because, of course, he was very close to sort of the Obama administration, and Obama was linked into sort of Clinton, where of course you've got the sort of the origins of the sort of the Good Friday Agreement. So he really gets that bit. And the great difficulty is that sort of we've had the sort of the vote on the sort of the internal market bill in the Lords, where they sort of they by a whopping great majority sort of took out the sort of the bits which are sort of most difficult in terms of sort of potentially undermining the Good Friday Agreement. Now, of course, what we've got this is a standoff whether Johnson's government puts those back in. One hopes that sort of what Biden will have done in that conversation is to sort of to reinforce the importance of continuing the spirit and principles and adhering to sort of the international treaty, which of course was signed between this country and the EU. So that there are great pitfalls there, and of course it's subject to so much uncertainty, and no deal cannot be ruled out. But I would have thought that sort of Biden would have been very clear that if you want a trade deal, you're not going to get it if you undermine the Good Friday Agreement, because of course that is very sacred, given the sort of the George Mitchell and his involvement in that, because America was instrumental in bringing the sort of both sides together. And it's interesting, of course, that sort of all the sort of the parties in Ireland, they understand the sort of the principles. And just as a matter of interest, I saw something. It was a article by Rob Peston that sort of some of the major food suppliers are sort of not going to be able to get food to Northern Ireland, whatever happens. So I think that there are big problems there. But what we don't want is anything that sort of plunges back into the bad old days of the sort of the internecine strife between the two communities there. We've had 20 odd years of peace, and long may it continue.
And what do you think a US-UK trade deal could look like in the future then, with Biden as president rather than Trump?
Well, yeah, it's interesting, that, isn't it? Because of course, I mean, quite clearly, the UK will be free to sign a deal if it can, provided, of course, that there's the willingness on both sides. One hopes that we sort of don't get overwhelmed by chlorinated chicken. And what's interesting is that, regardless of who is president, whether it be Biden or Trump, their standards are not going to change anytime soon. So it's interesting. So what America, what is it they want from us? And the reality is I can't see that changing greatly. Yeah, we're going to continue to sell the same products we sell. What's more of a worry, of course, is that sort of America produces food a lot more cheaply, but by undermining, or at least not being so adherent, also having such stringent, if I can put it correctly, standards on food safety and cleanliness, then quite clearly what we don't want to have in this country is a lot of American produced food, which, yeah, let's face it, would only undermine our own British farmers or English farmers for that matter. So yeah, a trade deal will be interesting. I've always been of the view that this whole thing about this American trade deal, it's kind of overplayed, because what more can we sell them that they can't already get anyway? And of course it all comes down to cost, and we're not sometimes the sort of the cheapest, so we shall see. Undoubtedly, of course, if it secures jobs, that's a good thing, but we shall see how that one plays out. That'll be interesting.
Thanks for joining us, Steve.